Hello folks, today we're going to do some root over rock work, just kind of a talk. Right here I'm going to expose this for the first time and see what I've got here. It's all a big mystery. A lot of the root over rock that I'm doing is a lot of experimentation actually to see what works best, because generally speaking, if you grow a tree in the ground, it will prosper a lot more than if you grew it in a pot, generally speaking. But sometimes space is at a premium, or the items you want to grow is so small you need to protect it. And this is part of the problem that I thought about, and that's the roots on the upper level not getting enough moisture to really form around the rock like I would hope it would. But no problem. I can always transfer this to the ground and just let it keep growing that way. So you can't really see it from that far away, but there are roots coming here. But as this soil on the upper level dried out, a lot of these roots just simply died off or started sending out small feeder roots elsewhere instead of continuing to form and be this strong clasping root that I was looking for. And here's another example right here. That root just ended abruptly right there because this soil was not moist enough. Look at how dry that is. Most of the roots that you can see right here are the original roots that I brought in around the tree, and this was an air layer actually. You can see some of the roots here, but this soil just was too dry. So the solution there is to not constrict the opening at the top as much as I did with the plastic, so that I can allow more moisture to run down, or to do like I generally do, and that's to bottom water the plants. In other words, I sit it in a soak tub and let the water go up and provide all of the moisture that the roots need from that standpoint. But as you can see, the tree is healthy. It's getting enough moisture, but it's primarily just enough that comes in along the side and drains down to the bottom, because I haven't actually set this in a soak tray in probably 9 months. So this I'll probably just rewrap it and do a better job of watering it from the bottom. Okay, and we're walking. I haven't gotten around to this. I'm allowing some of these outside feeder roots to die off. The stronger roots are continuing to reach into the soil bottom, and as these die off, I'll go ahead and secure this to cause the roots to grow closer to the rock and to form that clasping movement. Also, what I'm doing is watering the plants on a normal schedule and allowing the soil to wash out from the roots. So that's part of why I haven't actually tied that off yet. This is a little maple that I'm just piddling around with. A little leaf burn there, but here we go with forsythia, roots over rock, and that's about 6-7 years old, and it's done a really nice job. And so now the top part just has to be trimmed according to the owner's wishes. But my job there was to create a good clasping root system to work with, and the top can be dealt with at any time. The other day I uncovered these root over rock Trident maples here. Okay, there's about 6 or 7 of them here, and again, the object is not to worry about the tops, but to work the roots and to see what is needed to cause the roots to grow in the configuration that you want, and to get them to secure around the rock in such a manner that it looks like it's been there forever. Hopefully you can see this. I've got some nice roots. That's a little knot there, but I'll just have to live with it. And some crossing roots, depending on how this looks. Once all of this soil is allowed to be washed away, some of these roots will be trimmed out and others retained. Again, you can see the down roots, strong, healthy, and as I said with the other planting, I'm allowing this to stay open like this for right now, so as I water this, the soil will wash away. And I mean, I could wash the soil away, secure the roots really quick, and go from that point. But I'm choosing to allow these roots to harden off, and you can see the strong down roots. These are new ones. In the other pot, remember I said we had some that just abruptly ended, and that was because the soil dried out and there was no moisture for the tips to continue, and that's just where it ended. Well, this had some nice soil. As a matter of fact, I just cut half of this pot off. It was a gallon pot, a growing pot, so the top of the pot was about here, and all of this was wrapped. And so I just exposed it a few days ago, and you can see all of the roots around the edge here. And again, as I water this, a lot of that will go away, and the tree will be forced into sending the roots down closer to the rock, and or it'll die. and I'll get what I want out of it. But my thought is that the tree will send the root down deeper into the soil. In other words, the feeder roots that are on the other side of this toward the soil will start going in. And that will happen because now we have UV or sunlight coming in, all of the sunlight, the rays, and then the heat will force that root to go in closer to the tree. And again, for my purposes, the roots will start dividing at this bottom area here. And this is about where the pointer is, about the soil level at the, we'll call it the top of the planting eventually. And I'll cut it down probably another inch or maybe 2 inches below this, and anything below that is coming off. And that'll be the design of that tree. And whatever happens to the top is beyond me at this point. But you can see how that tree is grasping that. And again, most of my ties were done with the black electrical tape, and you can see the band on here right there, the discoloration, and that's from the electrical tape being in place. Discoloration is better than girdling. And you can see this other tree here, nice curvy movement. Let me move around here. So we move these plum trees and apple trees here, and Trident maples. So anyway, you can see that, how the movement is there, and how it's going pretty close to the crevice of that rock. So, and again, I cut the tops out of these the other day also. These have been growing in these pots probably 3 years now, and each year I've handled these pots no less than 3 times. In other words, I either raised the planting up in the pot and rewrapped it, or I've trimmed branches out, or but primarily is root work, you know, trying to get like right here, get these roots to clasp around the rock to get some kind of design. These young Trident maples are very resilient, and being that they're in the pot, all of the roots are contained and not dug from the ground, I'm more apt to manipulate the roots out of the pot at any time of the season versus these that I have in the ground. I wouldn't dig one of these. It's April 14th right now. I wouldn't just simply dig most of these out of the ground right now and try to do anything with them. I mean, other than dig a bigger hole, dig a large hole around the root ball and transfer it that way. But to try to do something in a bonsai pot or a growing pot like what I'm doing here, I wouldn't try that, because I would end up cutting the roots on that versus all of these roots being contained. And this, in this terracotta pot, to me, it did not perform as well as these in the black growing pots. The terracotta is, to me, more heat sensitive. The black pots get hotter because of the coloration. The terracotta gets hot, but it breathes more, and but again, to me, it retains the heat in the material, whereas when I water my plants in these black pots, the heat dissipates just as quickly as I water them. You know, I mean, I could water this until the water runs out of the bottom, but that terracotta is going to retain some heat. So I think that has something to do with it also. The terracotta wicks away some of the moisture. And to me, these things require copious amounts of water. In fact, for the first 2 years that I was coming to this point, I would let them soak in my soak trays, you know, day, 2 days, 3 days, it didn't matter. I'd water them, feed them with fertilizers, liquid fertilizers and such, root stimulant, and, you know, even liquid iron in the baths. So that's part of the way that I've handled this. But to me, copious amounts of water makes a difference, and the proper amount of sunlight at the time that this thing is growing. I've got a Trident maple or two behind me that I planted in the ground, and I mean, they took off like gangbusters. Why? Because the soil was rich with fertilizers, a good sunny location, lots of moisture, and a tree that basically started out about like that, which is about 3/8 of an inch, more than doubled and is almost 2.5 inches over a year and I'll say about 4 or 5 months. So you know, it just makes a difference of where the tree is planted, how much moisture and fertilization it gets. This tree, I rewrapped it immediately because of its positioning on that tree. The trunk was pulled away from the crevice in that rock, and I needed it really to get in there and start clinging really good. So I rewrapped it immediately, and I did not cut down the pot because I really had to bend and pull to get that in that ledge underneath. I don't know if you can see that, underneath that crag of a piece of a rock there. So anyway, again, this electrical tape, good and cheap. It holds well enough, and you have to put a few loops on there to get it to hold. But here's another example of root over rock. Pot's been cut down, and I keep this soil good and moist, again, to give the feeder roots beneath the soil surface more of a chance to get established, acclimate, and to really dig into that. And these are coming along pretty well. Just my opinion, just my opinion. And this is really a linear looking rock here. So I'm hoping I have some really good down roots because there's no real movement on it one way or the other. It's all pretty much vertical. But as you can see, lots of roots there. Now, and this one right here is, I think that's pretty interesting right there. Kind of saddleback, if you will, arched over that rock. Nice root movement, and even a secondary movement right there, where the root comes over the rock. I may have to re-secure this to ensure that root stays beveled into the crevice of that rock. I even put a little wire on this to work the top. It just lent itself to that. All of these spiky up branches in that tree, I'm not certain of the future of all of them, but I cut a few off yesterday, and I'm pretty certain more will come off. Speaking of the future of things, this branch right here, that's actually the original apex of the tree. But as you can see, once it was curved and it went down, the energy spiked up. And these secondary branches became more dominant, and you can see which is most dominant. This was primary, That's secondary, and then that's tertiary. I cut that one back. It bifurcated. This one continued to rise. But again, I call it a stegosaurus because of all these up spikes. But anyway, my purpose right now is creating good roots over these rocks. And as time goes on, and I'm always making cuttings from whatever tree, Trident maples, Japanese green maples, or whatever. When it comes to it, if I don't have a good down root structure, I will take cuttings and fuse them to these trees to get you know, a really nice, cohesive, coordinated root system around the rock. You know, so again, I've already been working on these, growing them from little seedlings. As a matter of fact, these seedlings and these in the ground are about the same age. These are more advanced because for about 3 years, all I did out here was basically just let the weeds grow up so the sun wouldn't burn the plants up. But I wasn't ready to have, you know, a couple hundred of these trees mature on me, and I had other things I wanted to do. So now you can see how green and lush all of these are, one row after the next. Here little, there little, everywhere little Trident maple. And so I've been weeding, I fertilized, I even throw out liquid iron in here in solution. As a matter of fact, these are crepe myrtle cuttings that I rooted right here in the ground. And that one's almost 3 feet tall right there, because this soil is really sandy, and rooting plants love that stuff. You get a little moisture to it and they'll do quite well for you. So my purpose here again is to talk about root over rock. A buddy of mine had a plant that was a root over rock. It was in a container, a growing pot. He put it on a flat, well, it looked like a plate. So he put it on a flat surface so he could display the roots going down over the rock. And it died on him. The planting expired. And he was wanting to know, why did it die? Well, just as I was telling you, I've left this soil on here, but I've left the roots exposed instead of rewrapping it. His plant, in my opinion, died from dehydration, from exposure. Those roots that were contained before had plenty of moisture, was hidden and shaded from the direct sunlight, and I didn't lift the rock to see how many roots he had underneath the rock, which would have given him a better chance of survivability if there were more roots under the rock than, you know, than was exposed, I suppose. But again, those roots, the fine feeder roots, you can see these right here. They're drying out. Even these along the edges here, they're drying out. But this tree is still alive and healthy. Why? Because I've still got the soil here, and there are feeder roots underneath and close to the rock. And I water this several times a day. Well, actually, I mist it pretty well to keep it moist. You can see this, the soil content here is more organic, and the soil is darker and it retains more moisture. This is more sandy, more pine bark, chips and such. A lot of stuff that I'm growing like this, I just reuse bonsai soil and add to it, whatever happens to be at hand. As long as I've got some sort of grit in that soil, I'm satisfied, because the grit is what's going to break up the roots for me. So you can see right here, there's all the speckles stuff that you see there. You can see the little red speckles here, which is turfus. It's the Pro Mix. I got pine bark in there, perlite. And again, a lot of this was reclaimed soil from bonsai mix that, you know, I had used before. Plants died, or I up potted, and, you know, for whatever reason. So anyway, that's the thought, that's the idea of root over rock. Lots of ways of doing it, lots of technique that you can use. As a matter of fact, this right here in the ground is a Trident, and I placed it in the ground. You can see the top part of that rock. I might just get ambitious. It's April 14th right now. Dig that up and see what's going on. You know, yep, I could dig that up and not be afraid of it, because I've got the tree wrapped around that rock probably 4 to 6 inches, and then the roots that go down into the ground beyond that, they can be sacrificed. So I have more trees planted in gallon pots further in the back, and even another planting that I have, root over rock, and I have this year I actually grafted on a couple of seedlings to create roots around the rock, so that I'll have a better root display. But anyway, that is my little talk on root over rock. Moisture, very key in producing a good root over rock affair. If you're going to grow it in a pot or a container, bottom water the plant. Soak the plant deep, soak it long. Don't submerge it now. Just get it at a good deep level and let it soak in for a day at least. You know, you can add your liquid fertilizers, your root stimulators, your hormones, or whatever you want to add to it, whatever micronutrients. You could add it to that water and it will be absorbed. Your liquid iron and such. You can do foliar feeding while you're in that tub soaking, and everything is great. Bob's your uncle. All right, talk to you later. Thanks.